Having a full loose screws isn't necessarily a bad thing in learning game development. It's actually a huge advantage. So please let me explain. Because right now you're probably sitting there and you're thinking that tutorials is the best way and the only way to learn game development. But that's completely false. The last time that you watched a tutorial, do you remember the things that you even watched? Do you remember how to do these things? Let's say you watch a tutorial on whatever it might be. Could you be able to replicate it right now if you open the game engine? No, right? You don't. And that's exactly why tutorials, it doesn't work. Your brain just doesn't remember the things because it was so easy for the brain, and it also didn't get any feedback. So you're basically sitting there and you're skipping the two essential things that is required in learning, which is both effort and it's also going to be feedback. So you're just skipping these when you're watching the tutorial. In short, we need active learning. You need to actively do things, you need to learn by doing. And in game development, that's going to be by building. Right now, you're just so sophisticated, you are such a perfectionist that you can just imagine sitting there actually struggling with something, making something bad, making something that doesn't work, breaking something. You're such a perfectionist that you aren't able to do these things. You are just so afraid to actually build that you're just watching these tutorials because that's easy, it doesn't require any effort, it's very easy, like you don't have to think. You can do it like at 9 p.m. in the evenings, like after your work and everything. Even when your brain is like 5% on, right? You have like 2 brain points left. Tutorials are so easy and it also doesn't require any failure from you. So obviously when you fail, when you build something, which is what I'm preaching, you build and you actually fail. That's hard, right? You actually need to think, you actually need to fail. That's going to be painful to actually make something that doesn't work. That's painful, yeah, it is. But that's how you actually learn. I'm going to tell you what's going to be more painful, and that's going to be stuck in tutorial hell or just watching tutorials for multiple months, and in the end you haven't even learned anything. You can't make anything because you didn't learn anything. That's painful. And you also kind of knew this already. You can imagine in math class in school when you had math. First, the teacher explained like the general overview. Okay, that's actually needed to solve the problem. I agree with that. We need some sort of information to play around with, to actually experiment and build with, sure. But you didn't actually just take that knowledge that the teacher gave you when they were explaining. You didn't just magically take that and then just put it into your brain. Because if it was that easy, you would probably be like the smartest man in the world. You would probably know everything. If you just remember everything that people told you, you'd be extremely smart. But that's not how learning works. Learning, it requires the two things. It requires both effort and it also requires feedback, and especially effort. That's hard, right? We actually need to do something to learn. So that's kind of the barrier. That's why we aren't all super geniuses that just remember everything, because learning, it requires effort and it requires us to actually do something. So going back to the math class example, you actually learn math when you solve the math problems. When the teacher said, do these specific math problems, and you actually solve them, and maybe they were wrong, maybe they were right, it doesn't matter, right? As long as you got feedback, you know, okay, this doesn't work, this is wrong, okay? Now you learn that, that's feedback, okay? That doesn't mean that you didn't learn anything, it doesn't mean that you didn't progress. If it's wrong, your brain is going to know that, because you're going to get this pain in your body, and you're going to remember this moment much better than me just telling you, you can't do this, you can't do this. This works, this doesn't work. When you actually tried something, you spent effort, you use a lot of your brain to solve this specific thing, and it didn't work, the teacher told you, no, that's wrong. That's just awesome for your learning, because you're actually going to remember that. That's actually like slightly painful. Or when you solve a problem and it's correct and the teacher says, yeah, that's correct, you did it right. You're going to get like a small good feeling in yourself, you spent effort on the thing, and you got like real feedback, so you actually figured it out yourself. And that's how you're actually going to remember things. And this applies to every single thing in the world. Okay, we need a concept overview, but then we need to actually spend effort, we need to do an attentive attempt, and then we need feedback. So we obviously need to know like what's wrong and what's right. This applies to like learning languages, it applies to learning math, applies to learning drawing, it applies to learning code, it applies to learning modeling, it applies to learning pixel art. Every single thing in the world, every single field in game development, it applies to everything, right? Experience is the greatest teacher. This is completely true. This has been researched, like all of my advice is grounded in learning research and also in my own journey, because I've been exactly like you, stuck into the hell, not knowing how to learn. And then I figured out that I just learned so much faster when I just built. Just turn my brain off, okay, I'm just going to try something. Turn my brain off and I learned for some reason. That's just how learning works, right? When you're watching a tutorial, it's like watching someone else lift weights at the gym. you can see their progress, right? Okay, you can get the concept of like how you do this exercise, but you're not going to build any muscle from just watching them. But now it's important that I tell you that knowing how to learn is only half of the journey. You also need to know what your goal should be, because right now you might just not be conscious of what your priority is. In learning game development, you just kind of sit there and you have this dream game in your mind maybe. You might just want to make prototypes forever, or you just make these like big projects, then you scrap them, you start over. But your goal should actually be to finish one small game, right? That should be your goal. Finish one small game, and that doesn't mean like 2 weeks. No, that's not the game, that's a prototype, right? Especially your first one. And that also doesn't mean to work on something for multiple years, right? The specific and the best like time frame to work on your first game is going to be around 60 days. That's what I found. Around 45 to 60 days is what I think is the best. It's the time frame that I have inside of Smartini. Even if you are a complete beginner, I also allocate like a few less days if you are a complete beginner than 60 days. So at least inside of Smartini, that's the time frame that we use. I have 60 days for all my students, so even if you're stuck in the tutorial hall or you are a complete beginner, you can make a game in around 60 days. And obviously if you are a complete beginner, then you need to allocate a bit less time to actually work on the game and more on learning. But after you join, and this is the goal that everyone can have watching this video, is that you can finish your first game in under 2 months, 60 days, assuming you have around 6 to 9 hours a week or more. And the reason why you should be really conscious, really aware of your priority, which is going to be finish your first game, is that game development is all about making games. You can make these small prototypes and you're not going to get anything from them, right? You're just going to make them, you're going to have them on your PC. Doesn't mean anything, you don't have anything to show. There's no one that's going to play a prototype of yours. It's not impressive to have a prototype. It's impressive to have a game. A game you can tell your friends, you can get your friends to download it, you can get your family to download it if it's like a mobile game. When people ask you like, what have you made? It's much better to actually show a game than just a small shit prototype or like 1,000 unfinished projects. No one cares about a prototype or a unfinished project. Finishing is everything in game development. That should be your #1 priority. And you're going to learn so much from actually finishing a game, not just making a game, but finishing it, publishing it, that you would never be able to learn either way, because experience is the greatest teacher, as I've told you. When I made my first game, Neon Surge, it wasn't good, okay. That's not the point, it wasn't good. But I learned so many different things that I know now that I can teach you about how we actually learn, but more importantly, like practically how you make a game, like code architecture, for example. As I said, experience is the greatest teacher. Sure, you can study code architecture, but you're not going to like fully understand it, fully be able to make expandable and changeable code if you haven't had real world practical understanding or practical experience with that. As I told you, you actually need to do something to learn it. So code architecture, that's something I had to learn. The code was very messy. I learned the importance of it, and I also learned how to manage a bigger project. I also learned how to use AI agents much better. Sure, you can use AI agents in like prototypes, but then you can just kind of copy and paste what ChatGPT gave you. I actually learned how to use coding engines like more advanced, which was really good and very useful. I also learned about like game design, even though I didn't study it. I just learned like kind of what's fun when I got player feedback when people played my game. I learned what's fun, what's not fun, things like that. I learned how to make real UIs. So how to make a UI that actually like correlates to a game, not just a prototype UI. The most important thing is obviously I learned about publishing. So I learned about how publishing works, what I can expect, like how many views, downloads, things like that, store page, all these things. And I also learned that when I published to more platforms. So when I published to App Store, that's a great experience to have when I actually published to App Store. And when I published to Google Play, that's also some great experience that I now have that I would never be able to learn if I just made prototypes or unfinished projects. So finishing a game should be your #1 priority. And I'm telling you now, if you want to execute on this, you want to release your first game in only 60 days or less, and you want that just 100% completely guaranteed, assuming you have 69 hours a week, even if you're a complete beginner, then you can join Smartini with the first link below. I have a 60-day release guarantee. So if you just follow the blueprint and you don't release within 60 days, I'll coach you for free. Literally, I'll tell you step by step what to do to actually finish the project if you didn't release within 60 days and you follow the blueprint, obviously. So I think Smartini is an awesome deal if you're watching this video and you want to release your first game. It's the first link in the description, as I told you, and you can learn more there. So check out Smartini, and thank you so much for watching.